what we're talking about when we talk about longevity is actually we're talking about preventative health. And really, what our healthcare system has been lacking is this preventative layer.
Welcome to Season of Stuck, the podcast that takes a deep dive into the all-too-human experience of feeling stuck. I'm your host, Deanna, and on this podcast, we explore all things stuck. How and why stuckness happens, what it feels like, how to learn and grow from it, and ultimately, how to get unstuck and move forward in an authentic, empowered way. If you are looking for insights, support, and community as you make your journey from stuck to unstuck, you're in the right place. Now, let's jump into today's episode. Just a heads up that today's episode dives into some health topics, so just a reminder that Season of Stuck is for general information only and should not be considered health, medical, or any other type of professional advice. For more information, you can check out the disclaimer in our show notes. Okay, now on to the show. Hello. Welcome to another episode of Season of Stuck. If you are new here, hi. My name is Deanna. I am your host, and I am also a person that has felt stuck a lot. Like a lot. So if you are feeling or have ever felt stuck, you've landed in the right place, and I am so happy that you're here. And if you are not new here, welcome back. I hope that you are feeling a little less stuck than you were when you got here, or at the very least, a little less alone in your stuckness. Because you're not alone. If there has been anything that making this podcast has taught me, it is that stuck is a foundational, universal human experience. We will all find ourselves there at some point or another. So, how about we navigate it together? Now, before we jump into today's topic, I actually have a few questions. And not questions for the guest, but questions for you. Today is the 17th episode of Season of Stuck, so we are fully in the swing of things with this podcast. And the more episodes we make, the more I find myself wondering about you, the listener. How did you find Season of Stuck? What about the podcast is working for you? What's not working for you? Is what we're making resonating? Does it feel helpful and valuable? Is there anything you'd like to see change or any specific topics you'd like to hear about? I just have so many questions. And so I wanted to ask you those questions directly. I put together a short listener survey, and I would love to hear from you. The survey is super short. It should take like 5 minutes, maybe less. And it's an opportunity for you to contribute your thoughts and insights and feedback on the show, which are thoughts and insights and feedback I can then use to make this show more tailored to you. You can access the listener survey at seasonofstuck.com/survey. Or if you want to go more in depth, I am also opening up a few slots each week for listener calls, which is where you and I hop on a quick video chat or phone call, your choice, and have a conversation about the show and your experience listening. Now, I know this is a bit more of a time ask, so as a thank you, I will be treating you to a virtual coffee, which you can enjoy while we chat or whenever you'd like. If you're interested in participating in a listener call, just shoot me an email at seasonofstuck@gmail.com and we can set up a time to chat. The point is, I want to hear from you, and I want to hear from you so I can make this show not only what I want it to be, but what you want it to be. So if you have the time and space, I would love to connect, and I hope you reach out. Okay, now that that is taken care of, let's jump into today's topic, which is something that happens to all of us to one degree or another, and that is aging. At the time of this recording, I am less than 2 months away from my 40th birthday. And with such a big birthday ahead, I've been thinking a lot about the passage of time, what the aging experience has been like so far, and what it might be like in the coming years. And let me just say, there has been so much about aging that I have just loved. Over the past decade specifically, I have put in a lot of work to better navigate the situations I often found myself stuck in my younger years. For example, I have learned how to stand up for myself and stop people pleasing. I have learned how to prioritize my own needs. I have learned how to stop saying yes when I actually mean no, how to stay present in conflict, how to be intentional instead of reactive, how to protect my time and energy, how to walk away from jobs or opportunities or relationships that are no longer a fit. Honestly, it's been a period of serious growth. And as a result, as I've gotten older, it feels like every year I become more me. I become more self assured, more grounded, more connected with the most authentic version of myself. And because of that, I can honestly say that I am heading into this next decade of my life with an overwhelming amount of excitement and gratitude. And that feels amazing. But I have to be real. There have also been some challenges that have come along with the aging process, and some of those challenges have definitely contributed to my feelings of stuckness. The biggest one is, of course, that my body doesn't feel the way that it used to. I don't have as much energy, I don't feel as vibrant, and I have more pain than I did at, let's say, 25. Now, some of that is for sure the fact that in my 30s, I was diagnosed with two autoimmune conditions, Hashimoto's and rheumatoid arthritis, or RA, which absolutely impact how my body feels and functions. But I think at least some of it just has to do with aging in general. For example, these days, it does not take much to injure myself. I feel like I can sneeze or turn my head too fast, and boom, neck pain that lasts for days. And because my body has been somewhat on the decline in recent years, I have also, at times, felt stuck in fear around the future. Will my body just keep declining with age? Will I have more pain, less mobility, more issues to deal with as time continues to pass? And on top of that, I would be lying if I said I didn't sometimes get caught up in the aesthetics of aging. Now, to be clear, I think people are beautiful at every age and at every stage. But when it comes to myself, I can be a little more judgmental. There have definitely been times I've looked in the mirror, especially over the past few years, and have not been happy with the changes that I see. I wanted to learn more about aging and how to feel as good as I possibly can, physically and emotionally, as I move through the process. And that is when I came across an exciting area of science called longevity science. Longevity science is essentially the study of what actually causes the aging process and how we can slow or even reverse those causes to not only live longer, but to feel better as we get older. And today's guest is an expert on all things longevity. Simon Sakhai is a longevity expert and the founder and CEO of Jung Plus, a science-backed, first-of-its-kind longevity lifestyle brand that translates the latest scientific advancements in aging research into products and technologies that aim to slow aging and extend healthy lifespans. During his MBA studies at the University of Oxford, Simon also served as president and later chairman of the Oxford Society of Aging and Longevity, where he fostered advocacy and research into gerontology and longevity science. Simon believes longevity should be available for the billions, not just the billionaires, and that the implementation of the right, consistent habits can help people get unstuck with achieving and reaching optimal health and overall longevity. During our conversation, Simon and I take a deep dive into aging and longevity, including some of the ways aging can make us feel stuck, how modern science is unraveling the aging process, and what that means for us as we age, and actionable strategies and lifestyle changes we can make to support longevity and optimal health and feel our best, no matter what our age. Let's jump into my conversation with Simon. Simon, welcome to Season of Stuck. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super stoked to have this conversation.
I am super stoked to have this conversation. Aging and aging gracefully and kind of maximizing where I'm at in my life has been front and center for me. I'm turning 40 this year, which feels like a big birthday. So I'm really excited to get a better understanding of longevity science and how that can make people feel less stuck through the aging process. But before we get started, I would love for you to introduce yourself to the listeners and tell us a little bit about your background and what inspired you to get into the longevity space.
Sure. Well, first of all, I think it's never been a better time to be turning 40 or to be turning any age that gives you a little stress or drama. We're at a point in time where we're starting to realize that aging is not the inevitability we thought it was. And we'll get into that later. But I guess similar to you, I got into longevity. Partially, I was in the right place at the right time. I was in my early 30s and I was starting to experience aging for the first time. I think in your 20s, every year gets better, every year you get better. And then come 30s, I think for me at least, I started like a lot of intersecting things started happening where physically I started to age for the first time. And it was a weird experience just because, as you know, in your early adulthood, like things just keep getting better. And then similarly, I started like seeing how peers of mine started taking various paths. And whereas I felt like everyone in their 20s was kind of doing the same thing, professionally, personally, whatever, suddenly in your 30s, it's like some people are getting married, having kids, some people are going to raves, some people become super successful. And it just became a very confusing time to think about who I was and who I was meant to be, because in your 20s, there's no real question around what you're meant to be. It's just like everyone's kind of the same. And I happened to be studying at Oxford and I was working in the healthcare space. I was working on a sleep startup actually. And I had met a bunch of scientists on campus who were describing aging as if it was a disease. And they were describing aging as a disease that needed treatment. And this is like 5.5 years ago now when people weren't talking about it as much. I thought they were insane. I was like, what are you talking about? And I think what happened was I was so used to the idea of anti-aging in the cosmetic sense that when I heard this, I was just instantly turned off. I was just like, no, stop telling me about wrinkles. This is a scam. And I, of course, when something is weird and triggers you, and also I was going through all these things, I was like, let me look into this more. And as I got into it and as I started engaging with these scientists and going to more talks, I was just shocked. I was shocked in two ways. One, I was shocked to find that this was real, that what they were talking about was a real scientific thing. This wasn't fringe, this wasn't frivolous. But more importantly, the way I realized it was real was when I actually looked at what it was they were talking about when they were talking about aging, and what they showed me their receipts. And what they showed me was the framework that this new branch of science is using to slow down the aging process. So it went from something that was like intangible and what are you talking about? Is this even possible? To a no, look, this is our method. These are the things that we're targeting. And essentially what they showed me, and this is the foundation of modern longevity science, is something called the hallmarks of aging, which emerged quite recently. This idea that aging, even though we use one word to describe the aging process, it's actually a collection of very specific things that are happening to you. So the first hallmarks of aging paper identified 9 hallmarks of aging. Recently, it's been expanded to 12. But the idea here is that actually we can figure out what's driving the aging process. And not only can we figure it out, if we go through each one of these things one by one, we can target it, fix it. And if we fix all of them, we can actually stop aging. So I was like, oh, well, that seems much more realistic. You know, if we can agree that DNA damage over time, the buildup of senescent cells, chronic inflammation, if there are these set things that drive the aging process and we can agree on that, well, then we can also reverse engineer these actual issues that arise. And it went from being hocus pocus to a, wow, how are we now going to do this? And I was sucked in.
I had such a similar experience. So, coming up through my 20s, physically, I stopped drinking when I was 25. And particularly after that, I felt so good physically, right? Physically, I just kept feeling better and better as I came up through my 20s. And also, I started feeling more grounded in myself and who I am and kind of coming into myself more. But there was a point around 30 where, while that sense of groundedness and getting to know myself better and like really figuring out who I was kept accelerating, the physical part just took a nosedive. And as I progressed through my 30s, my body changed and I found myself dealing with more chronic conditions and just like overall sense of not feeling great and fatigue and all of these things. So it is very exciting to hear that there is a possibility of bringing that physical part back up to meet how incredible I feel inside as I'm turning 40, and then can also match that with my body. So I'm very excited to dig into that a little bit more. This is a podcast about stuckness. So, from your perspective, in what ways does aging make us feel stuck?
Great question. So there's two ways of looking at this. One is on a biological level, and then one is a socio-cultural level, which then turns into a self-perception level and psychological level. So I'm going to go through each one of these and talk about how I think aging makes you feel stuck. So the root of it is biology. And in Human Evolution 1.0, you age, there's nothing you do about it. You go through all of the stages and then you die. And there are various phases of aging. And, we can see it, especially in female biology, there are certain things that happen at certain milestones that will force you to change how you engage with this world. Fertility is a great example of that. Like for women, women are disproportionately affected by aging on a biological level. Certain windows close and they're not able to do things, having children. And whether it's reproductive aging, whether it's frailty, whether it's cognitive decline, what we used to be seeing was a real biological effect on your body that limited what you were physically capable of doing in this world. Now, that's the biological bit. Now we move on to the sociocultural bit. Because we evolved with this specific process and this biological pillars in our lives, this created a certain social structure and it created certain social expectations around different life stages. So marriage had to be within fertility window. Hard work had to happen when you had the most energy. Retirement happens after you've done this. So when you start peeling back the layers of how we've decided to live in almost every aspect of our lives, it's reinforced by our biological makeup and the biological phases of development. There's an argument to say that the entire idea of a nuclear family, or this idea of you have this one career, or is really defined by our internal biology. So that's fine, but what does that mean? And I think what it means is these ideas of socio-cultural expectations that are reinforced biology then bleed into these ideas of beliefs and belief systems and the idea of getting stuck in what we think we're supposed to be at any given time. And there's many examples of this, right? One example of this is like, I should have achieved X by this age. I should have been married by this age. I should have had kids by this age. I should have this one career by this age. And that's, I think, really difficult because what ends up happening is rather than these life stages giving you positive reinforcement about your life, they're sort of guiding you in a direction that may not be in your best interests. And like, there's so many examples of this. And probably one of my favorite examples is the idea of like your soulmate and the idea of like falling in love with the right person until death do you part. Like, if you think about the traditional idea of marriage until death do you part, well, people used to die at like 30 or 35. So if you got married, you get married at like, 16, 18 traditionally. Till death do you part lasted 10 years. You would only have to like put up with this person for 10 years and then you would just die. And now what we're seeing is we're seeing people living into their 70s and 80s, this expectation that you find this person in your early 20s and that you expect to co-evolve for multiple decades, and stay together to this time. I think it puts so many strains on people and like expectations about how they're supposed to feel with a partner or how they're supposed to feel in relationships. And I think it could be really damaging. It could take away from you more than give to you. From a professional standpoint, I also think there's this huge hangover from this idea that everyone's supposed to have a career or even a personality. So our capitalist system has evolved to give us functions and to say, this is who you are, and this is what you need to drive towards. And if you want to be excellent at something, you have to spend your whole life being dedicated to it. Certainly in the past couple of centuries, and you look at lots of like other cultures, Japanese culture, you have this idea that you spend your life mastering something. Again, this comes back to the question of, well, how long is life, and like how much time do you need to master something? And I think, yes, if you're only living into your 40s or 50s, or only living healthily into your 40s and 50s, then you certainly might only have time for like one or two careers. But if you unravel that framework and you unravel those expectations, it sort of creates space for you to be much more thoughtful and open and intentional to being multiple selves. And I'm not saying that this means like you need to have polyamorous relationship with multiple people and quit another job after every 6 months. But I think just like being much more open to different chapters in life.
I'm so glad that you said that. I've never thought about age-related stuckness through that lens, but as you were talking, I was remembering the pressure that I have felt at different stages in my life. The pressure to find a partner and to get married, the pressure to have children, which is a decision I ultimately opted out of, the pressure to have my shit together, as they say, by a certain age. And I was a kind of late bloomer. Like I said, I struggled with substance use disorder. I had a gnarly alcohol addiction when I was younger. And so it wasn't really until 25 that I started getting my ducks in a row and really started my life. And I remember feeling so old, which is ridiculous now when I look back and I'm like, oh my God, you're 25. But there was this sense of I had missed out on this important developmental stage and that my age was a hindrance and I was behind and starting later. And you're right. And this is also something that I have tapped into more as I've gotten older, that it's like every day is a new opportunity to start something new. And there are people who are discovering new things and discovering new aspects of themselves and starting entirely new careers or relationships or personal growth journeys through the entirety of their lives. There are people who start painting in their 80s or who start snowboarding in their 60s or whatever the case may be. And I feel like that perspective can really help us get unstuck. Like if we are thinking that our age dictates what we are and are not able to do, it's like a one-way ticket to feeling stuck. And so freeing ourselves from that idea and longevity science empowering us to physically be able to do those things feels like a really important perspective.
I love hearing your journey, and I love speaking to, and I hate saying this, like people, older people or people who've at least been around for a few decades, because when you talk to anyone that's older than 20, they can look back and so clearly say, I had this phase in my life, I had this phase in my life, I had this phase, and they're able to find it so beautiful. I think, a really helpful framework that I constantly refer back to is comparing what is called a balanced lifestyle versus a chapter-based life. And I think traditionally we're all being told, oh, you need to have balance. You need to have balance. So you need a work-life balance, almost as if there's a pie chart, and you need to dedicate 20% of your time to your career, 20% to your loved ones, 20% to charity, 20% to socializing. Again, it comes back to aging, and that probably makes sense if you have like a limited amount of time to work with. You're like, right, I need to maximize in the next 10 years and make sure I'm getting a little bit of everything. But I actually think a much more healthy way to look at it is this way that is actually a chapter-based lifestyle, which listening to your story, you can see so clearly is that in life, especially over a long life, life comes in waves. It comes in phases, and you can't control it. You can't control when you're going to meet a loved one. You can't control when like your favorite career is going to fall into your lap. It just sort of happens to you. And I think if you have this more long-term perspective. And if you're able to tap into the truth of the science and that I'm going to be around for a really long time, hopefully what it should do is free up some space in you to say, hey, I don't need to be everything right now. Well, that phase can come someday. That moment, those couple of years, that decade where everything is about career or family will come someday. I can have confidence around that. Not that I need to do it all right now, because frankly, I just don't think that's how life works.
And so let's talk about how longevity works into this. And I guess the first question for people who aren't familiar, what exactly is longevity science?
Absolutely. So longevity science is a way of looking at human health. And its basic argument is saying that no one dies of old age. There's no such thing as dying as old age. You die from an age-related condition, you die from a chronic disease. And the underlying premise is that these chronic diseases are triggered by aging or exacerbated by aging. So things like cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes, you're much, much more likely to get them in old age rather than a biological youth. And therefore we call them age-related. And so I would say like healthcare 1.0 is this, we describe it as a reactive healthcare system where we treat the problem once you have it. So once you have cancer, once you have diabetes, again, capitalism, the way we've been able to monetize and create a kind of framework around healthcare was very much about let's find the problem and solve it once you have it. Longevity science takes a different perspective. And its underlying argument is that rather than finding a cure for a cancer, which, by the way, if we were to find a cure for cancer, like in every cancer, like one silver bullet cure for cancer, we'd only extend average lifespan by like 2-3 years. So the idea is rather than finding a cure for one of those, let's find a cure for aging. And it sounds like it's such a big deal, like, oh my God, a cure for aging? Like how are we going to do that? But as we can talk about, there is a pathway towards that. And so what we're talking about when we talk about longevity is actually we're talking about preventative health. And really what our healthcare system has been lacking is this preventative layer. You have somewhere that you can go when you're sick, but you don't have a place that or a thing or an entity or a structure that's proactively keeping you healthy. And I think this is a very Western thing. When you look at Eastern traditions, whether it's food or medicines, when you look at like Ayurvedic traditions or Chinese traditions, proactively intervening in your daily life to stay healthy when you're already healthy is what you do every day, every second of the day. And every other sort of like traditional healthcare system was set up in that way. And then suddenly something happened in the West where we just were like, oh, like we see a problem, let's fix it. Oh, and also we could monetize that. So that's what we'll do. And the real problem with what we've done is we've actually already, there's an argument to say that longevity sciences already exist. And if you define longevity science as the ability to increase lifespan. So we've been able to keep people alive much longer than we used to. And so we can point to that and say, oh yeah, well, we've already been able to increase lifespan. What's the big deal here? Well, what's happening is we're able to treat conditions better. We're able to manage conditions better. We're able to manage cancer, manage diabetes, manage Alzheimer's. So people aren't dying from them, but they're being kept alive. So what's happening is people are staying alive. As they stay alive for longer, their health is still declining. Their frailty is still declining. Their functions are still declining. So while we've extended life, we haven't actually improved health. And we've actually created like an epidemic of suffering because now what we have is the average lifespan of people are into their 80s. And on average, people start getting the onset of some sort of chronic disease in their 60s. And from their 60s, people often not just have one, but multiple age-related chronic conditions. And so what we're talking about is we've extended lifespan, but we've gifted 2 or 3 decades where you're in suffering and you're a human ATM machine for our healthcare system.
There are so many different ways to go from stuck to unstuck. But one of the most productive, learning. Learning something new can help you expand your skill set and find new interest, and in the process, help you get unstuck. And if you want to learn something new, you will definitely want to check out Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community that offers thousands of classes designed to help you learn, grow, and tap into your creativity, all of which can help you make the journey from stuck to unstuck. And right now, Skillshare is offering a free month to new members. If you want to access Skillshare's entire library of classes and get the education and instruction you need to shake off the stuckness, just visit seasonofstuck.com/Skillshare and sign up for your free trial today. Again, that's seasonofstuck.com/Skillshare. So longevity science is not just about extending lifespan, but about improving the quality of life during those years and making people healthier and happier and feeling their best through 60s, 70s, 80s, and beyond.
Well, even 30s and 40s and 50s. I think if you said out loud 10 years ago, I work in aging science, you'd probably imagine like, oh, you're in a nursing home, like taking someone's grandpa's temperature. And nowadays, I think, well, hopefully people should realize that you start aging when you're born. And biological youth should be preserved as soon as you can, because it's harder to reverse than it is to preserve.
And chronic conditions aren't selective based on age. Like, yes, statistically, you're more likely to develop chronic conditions as you age, but those conditions can happen when you're younger. I have autoimmune issues. I have rheumatoid arthritis. I have Hashimoto's that came on in my 30s. So I've been managing chronic conditions for years and will for basically my entire life. So this kind of science that's really preventative and about, it's always been something that has puzzled me about healthcare, in that there is a solution to the problem, but we're not doing things to stop the problem before it happens. And that always felt so backwards to me.
It's awful. And this is the third and last time I'm going to use the word capitalism. And I am not anti-capitalist at all. But, there is a negative externalities, they call them. Look, I'm going to tell you something which you might not want to hear. You said that you developed these conditions in your 30s. I think if you sit down and think about it, or probably an uncomfortable thought for you to ponder, is the fact that they were lurking before your 30s. They were like a silent partner in your body, what we call preconditions, before any of the symptoms emerged. And this is really the problem, because people walk around thinking they're healthy. And actually, we call this apparent health. And people are in apparently good health. So this does not mean they don't have preconditions. And even if they don't have preconditions, it does not mean their body is still in a state of deterioration. Normal daily life, when you live, you experience damage. It's just a factor of having a metabolism and moving through this planet. So I don't want to scare people, because everyone's trying to sell you something, and the way they do that is to scare people. But the truth is that like being healthy just isn't good enough.
I actually had the experience when you were talking. So I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis in a very strange way. I wasn't having the classic symptoms. I had like this very random symptom that didn't seem related. And through that, I ended up getting diagnosed. So to your point, that RA was building in my body before I ever started having joint pain or inflammation. And it seems like it's shifting towards this, in at least the way that people think about their health, in that, to your point, it's not good enough to just, I'm going to be healthy, I'm going to go to the doctor and eat well. It's really about understanding what is happening with our individual bodies and taking steps to support our health at every stage.
Yeah, and I know you're probably eager to start talking about tangibly what we can do to slow down aging. And I think probably a segue into that, or a good stopgap to that, is talking about our primary healthcare system and what you just described to me as the experience of having certain symptoms and going to be seen, and then something else coming up. And I guess you were lucky that you even were able to go to a doctor that was able to catch it. So the issue I think that we have right now is that doctors, even primary care doctors, have all been taught reactive healthcare. Medical school and medical training is almost entirely sets doctors up to look at things from the standpoint of existing problems. And the classic saying, to a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And what that means is that doctors are woefully inexperienced and unprepared for real proactive preventative health. And just as a basic example of that, like the most basic example, sleep. Sleep is the foundation of almost every physiological and cognitive process. Sleep is enormously complex. Sleep like aging, we use one word to describe it, but it's all of these other collection of processes that are happening at the same time. There are almost 80 different sleep disorders. These sleep disorders, some of the more well-known ones are things like sleep apnea or restless leg syndrome or insomnia. These are as different to each other physiologically as a broken leg is different to a headache, is different to an infection. And right now, if I told you, hey, you've got a broken leg or you've got an infection, you'd know that you have to treat them differently. But doctors, on average, your doctor has maybe 2-3 hours of training in sleep medicine in their entire medical training. In their entire medical training, they have 2 to 3 hours. That's less than a podcast on sleep. And when we're talking about sleep, we're talking about something that is so foundational to your health. So you go to your doctor and you say, oh, I'm having issues with this sleep. You know what they're going to do? They are going to give you the most basic box standard sleep hygiene advice. And they're not going to be able to help you. And this is just one example. This is just one example of the many, many different aspects of your health that you can put in place to proactively prevent aging, where right now our healthcare system and our doctors are completely unprepared and untrained to support with.
And nutrition is similar, correct? Isn't it true that in traditional medical school, there is maybe one class on nutrition and how it ties into general health, and then that's it?
Correct. Yeah, nutrition is another huge, huge category. And, fortunately or unfortunately, to fill this gap left behind by, let's say, this reactive healthcare system, you can say that the wellness industry has filled this gap. And this becomes really problematic because wellness is very open-ended. There's a lot of charlatans. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of citizen scientists that will throw around some information about, oh, this is my blood type, therefore I should only eat steak, or, things that are just complete garbage. And so in the last decade, especially since COVID, those gaps have been filled. But I'm excited. The reason I'm excited about longevity science in particular is because longevity gives a real framework to wellness and to proactive preventative healthcare, because unlike just traditional health wellness, traditional wellness lacks a definition of what it means to be healthy. And in lacking a definition of what it means to be healthy, it lacks endpoints and it lacks targets. And so by introducing this idea of longevity and giving a real framework for what deterioration looks like, we're introducing endpoints, we're introducing goals. And so we go from let's say, a way of looking at your health and sleep and nutrition and lifestyle that is just like, oh, I just listened to what this guy said because he said it was good for me. We're now moving to a situation where we can say, right, I need to think about clearing the buildup of senescent cells in my body. I need to think about protecting my epigenome from damage. Like, we're starting to develop these categories, which to most people right now mean nothing. But I think over time will start to enter public consciousness as like real things that they need to look after. Like a great example of this is the concept of circadian rhythm. 10 years ago, maybe that was like a really niche concept. Not many people knew what a circadian rhythm was. If you mentioned melatonin, they'd be like, oh, what's that? Now, as people have become more, let's say, sleep aware, or the public consciousness has been switched on, people are starting to use that term circadian rhythm as like a more household thing, and they're starting to think about it in a different way. So I think the same is true of longevity and all of the various interactions with aging and deterioration. And what I think you're going to see is wellness 2.0 is going to be longevity. That is going to be the dominant framework for the average person when they're thinking about what they can be doing for their health. And that's super powerful. You can't do something unless you have a strategy and endpoints. So this is really exciting.
So let's dive into that. Say there is someone listening and they are really interested in leveraging longevity to help support a healthy aging process and be the most well that they can be, like what does that path look like? How can people use longevity to get unstuck from their biological aging process?
All right. Well, the first thing I'd say is you should think of this in terms of a longevity lifestyle. And if we're thinking about being unstuck, I don't know if we have people that meditate. Meditation is a great way of getting unstuck. And meditation is a practice. And you do meditation as if you're going to the gym, not just because of the meditation itself, but like the kind of knock on benefits of how it changes your relationship to yourself. So I think living a longevity lifestyle and getting into a routine that focuses on targeting your biological age, what I hope will empower you to socioculturally and psychologically get unstuck from this idea that you're 40 and you should be this or you should do that. So I'm going to tell you like the tricks and the frameworks and whatever of like what you can be doing and what you can incorporate in your life. But I really want you to think of this as a combination health, but also, let's say, unstuck self-perception framework to help you be the you want to be, regardless of what your age is. So there are 5 things that I like to recommend to people. And these are really well-established interventions that are very easy for you to implement in your life. Number 1 is longevity molecules and supplements. I'm a huge fan of supplements. And the exciting moment for supplements really arrived with longevity science. And this is partly to do with this idea of health not having an endpoint. You hear doctors saying all the time, like, oh, supplements don't work, supplements don't do anything. That's because they define working as something that treats a disease. When you don't have literacy to understand what's happening upstream, when you don't have the literacy to understand chronic inflammation or DNA damage or buildup of senescent cells, it's going to feel like, well, what are these supplements actually doing if you defined doing as something that fixes a disease? We're not trying to fix a disease here. We're trying to optimize health. So now that we have a framework, these hallmarks of aging, where we can start to really map out what damage is, we've also recently been able to look at what supplements or what compounds can intervene in these processes and have been shown to actually either mechanistically or on a core level affect the aging process on a cellular level. So not only are we able to see these supplements that do those and like ameliorate those processes, but when we start giving those supplements to model organisms in labs, whether they be C. elegans, a worm, or small mammalian models like mice, we're starting to see that when we give these, we can extend the lifespan of actual animals in labs with some of these. So there's this really exciting moment happening when we're starting to realize that supplements can play a huge role in this process. If we're targeting the right things and we are able to create the right sort of collection of interventions that take into account the complexity of aging. So there are supplements out there that have tried to take the complexity of the aging process, the hallmarks of aging, and reverse engineer a protocol that puts them all together in one. This is something that they do at like high-end longevity clinics. When you go to a longevity clinic, they take this complexity and they're like, right, you need a baseline longevity regimen. This is what they'll give you. I mean, I know I'm biased. Like we've produced, this is one of our products that we've manufactured. I think we have the best longevity protocol on the market, but there are others out there. You can check them out. I think at a basic level, you need a longevity molecule strategy that takes into account the complexity of aging. Unfortunately, there's actually not that many options. I would say there's probably like 2 on the market, 3 on the market, us being one of them. So the next thing you want to do is really think about lifestyle, because the efficacy of supplements is limited. And I don't think that you can just take supplements and expect to live forever. You need to think about, how am I going to change my lifestyle to accommodate these changes I want to make in my longevity? And there are supplements that reinforce these lifestyle choices. So if you really want to go deep into it, you can say, right, I have my core longevity supplements, and then I have my lifestyle targets, and then I have my supplements that enhance these lifestyle modifications. But we're not going to go into that for this topic. Like, I'm just going to now walk through some of the most science-backed lifestyle modifications for longevity. Number 1, intermittent fasting or calorie restriction. Now, these are two different things. Intermittent fasting is time restricted feeding. Calorie restricting is restricting your overall nutritional intake to a point of semi starvation. There's different data about both of these. I sort of lump them together because they're quite similar. But calorie restriction, out of all of the, let's say, health hacks or lifestyle modifications, has been proven to extend human lifespan in humans, not just in mice. But in humans, calorie restriction has been shown to make you live longer. That's huge. Fasting, when you intermittent fast, there are lots of, let's say, sub benefits that we observe. Things like enhanced autophagy, cellular turnover, improved gut microbiome. The data for intermittent fasting is not as strong as calorie restriction, but it's still extraordinary. And the things that intermittent fasting is able to do is people swear by it. I intermittent fast all the time. I'm intermittent fasting right now. So these are the two really big ones. When we're starting to look at like how is the longevity industry responding to this knowledge, actually a lot of the drugs that are being researched currently to extend longevity are called calorie restriction mimetics. So that is to say, looking for the thing in calorie restriction that's actually triggered in your body that makes you live longer, isolating that thing and reproducing it through a drug. So actually, there's a supplement that you can take that's thought of as a calorie restriction supplement, a mimetic. It's called terostalbine. It's a cousin of resveratrol, which many people might already know because it's a very popular anti-aging supplement. Unfortunately, resveratrol, while it's been shown to be very effective in mice, doesn't seem to be bioavailable in humans. So terostalbine, which is a cousin of resveratrol, is the choice to go for as if you wanted to take a supplement approach to, let's say. So that's calorie restriction or intermittent fasting. Of course, if you do this, you need to be on your best behavior when you're breaking your fast. This is not an invitation to gorge or eat unhealthily. Similarly, if you're doing intermittent calorie restriction, you still need to make sure that you're eating properly and you have a broad nutritional profile. This is not an invitation for anorexia. This is not an invitation to, that these things can be potentially really dangerous. And that we're not even talking about pre-existing health conditions, whether you're a man or a woman, whether you're a woman who's thinking about her cycle. Like there's a lot of complexities to this. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, restricting glucose from your diet. So taking out carbs or sugars. Now, a lot of people think that caring about blood sugar levels are something that you only have to do if you're diabetic. That is categorically not true. And it's not true for a number of reasons. One, in the modern day, so much of our diets is coming from carbs or sugars. The amount of sugars in our diet, even if we're not eating candy, is insane. Even if you're having fruit, I think fruit is a scam. Modern fruit is so far from what it used to be. Lots of the fruit that we eat today that we think are natural never existed. Oranges are not natural. We invented them. Watermelons used to be 90% rind and a little bit of pulp. Bananas used to be these giant seeds with like a little bit of pulp. And what we've done over the past thousands of years is we've selectively bred them to make them sugar bombs. And people are like, oh, but it's natural sugar. Well, so is refined sugar. Refined sugar is natural sugar. It's just refined. It comes from sugar cane. Anyways, all of which is to say, it's not even talking about how accessible fruit is nowadays. Sorry, that's my fruit rant. I'll stop. But we just have so much. And if it's not fruit and if it's not sugar, it's carbs, people going on vegetarian and vegan diets. What that means is that they're just eating lots of sandwiches and pastas and pizzas, which is just what's readily available in our food supplies. And so you have all of this, what we see when you have these high carb diets, high starch, high sugar diets, which is an inevitability of living in the modern Western world. You cannot escape it because that's just what the food supply is. We see this whole cascade of health issues, from insulin resistance to prediabetes to obesity, you name it. And that's just like the basics. When you start looking into the longevity science, you start seeing some really interesting things. When you have stable blood sugar levels, and when your blood sugar levels are consistently maintained to a healthy level, which would mean that you're restricting glucose from your diet to some extent, what we can see is that there are certain genes and pathways that are associated with longevity switched on. So when we're in a state of glucose restriction or we're taking these out, our bodies turn something on that is actually what we believe to be extending your longevity. And when you're in a state where you're taking all those carbs or whatever, you're switching those genes off. And when we see this in other categories, we see that people who have cancer and that are on chemotherapy, when they're on glucose restriction diets, they seem to respond better to the chemo, because what happens when you give glucose to a cancer is that it just reproduces more. You're giving it food, basically. So, I mean, this is not health advice, but the other real hack is thinking about the role of glucose and sugars in your diet. Number 3, sleep. We talked about sleep. Sleep is the foundation of your health. A lot of people already know this, so I'm not going to belabor this point. Just a few quick things that I'll say about sleep that I think are important to take into account. One, it's not just the length, it's not just the size, it's the quality of sleep that matters. Everyone has a different need for sleep length. So no one should show off that they only sleep 4 hours. If someone sleeps 9 hours and they need it, please never, ever call them lazy. Everyone has a different need for sleep because people have different qualities of sleep. Number 2, sleep quality. Sleep quality is actually many different things. I present that we have these sleep trackers now that just give you a sleep score, because I think it's very problematic to just say sleep. I think they do a good job of then breaking it down and say the different aspects of sleep, but there's many different things that go into the architecture of sleep. And like aging, sleep is very complex, and you need to think about various factors that go into what makes sleep good. And not a product plug, but sort of a product plug. This is why we created a sleep protocol. We have a product that breaks sleep down into the various things that happen while you sleep, from circadian regulation to neurotransmitter balance, to tissue repair, to DNA repair. And we've broken all of those up and we've corrected for them with a different compound or synergistic group of compounds. The idea being that in order to really improve sleep in all of its complexity, you need to take this multi-factor approach. So that's just something to think about when you're thinking about sleep, not as simple as you'd like to believe. Finally, the last thing, and I feel like I've been speaking for 7 hours, so I'll stop after this, but skin. Skin health is so important. And this is the most fun, because I think traditionally when people think about aging, they think about skin, they think about wrinkles, and they think about this cosmetic experience. And that cosmetic experience being important. And actually what I'm going to tell you is you're partially right, but you're partially wrong. Partially right in the sense that actually self-satisfaction and self-perception is a very important part of aging. So you will live longer if you're happier with the way you look. And there's absolutely nothing wrong to not want to have wrinkles or not want to whatever. But when we're talking about wrinkles, wrinkles are not aging. Wrinkles are a byproduct of aging. And skin is an organ. And actually, skin is a very important organ and is the foundation of your immune system. And people don't really think about it in this way. But basically, what your immune system and your entire immune function is doing is it's protecting your body from environmental damage. And every second of the day, your skin is experiencing trillions and trillions of bacteria trying to infect you, toxins, you name it. And every second of the day, your skin is protecting you from those things. And when your skin is unable to protect you from those things and they enter your body, you have an inflammatory response. Your body then has to deal with it. So the less your skin is able to protect you, the more your body is responding to these environmental toxins. When your body is experiencing and trying to react to those, that your body gets damaged and it falls into disrepair. It's like a car that has mileage, right? The more mileage it has, the more problems it's going to have. So skin health is an enormously important factor for the aging process, because healthy skin will keep you younger. And I mean biologically healthy skin. I'm not talking about wrinkles. I'm talking about the core health of the skin. And I'm also not just talking about your face, because that's what a lot of people think about when they think about skin. They're just like, oh, I'm just going to make sure my skin is whatever. And there's a lot that I can say about skin, but I think the main thing I think about skin from an aging perspective really is the issue of topicals and applying creams, and the idea of a skincare routine as being an anti-aging routine. It is not. When you think about the role of skin as an organ, it evolved to block everything out. Putting something on top of your skin, hoping that your body absorbs it, is an absurdity. Like the ear evolved to take in sound, not your toe. I don't play my toe music, I play my ear music. So when you look at skincare and you look at most of the molecules that are being sold that go on top of your skin, those molecules are so large, they can't pass through the outer layer of dead skin to get into the actual organ. And these are major molecules like collagen. Anytime you've seen a collagen cream, collagen molecule is giant. Same with hyaluronic acid. There's so many people that have skincare regimes with like a hyaluronic acid serum.
Like me, I have one of those.
Garbage, throw it out.
That is like the antithesis to the entire skincare industry. We've been told since as long as I can remember, like, you got to put these things on your face. That's what's replenishing those molecules that you need.
So yeah, they did it because they wanted to sell you something. And it's not to say there aren't things that you can apply that can regenerate skin or pass through the dermal layer. I'm a big fan of retinols. I'm a big fan of vitamin C. I'm a big fan of niacinamide and some peptides. So some peptides are small enough that they can actually pass through that barrier, but most of the stuff just doesn't. I think the issue was the skincare industry blocked your pores, sold you moisture, and tricked you into thinking that that was skin health and that was age and that was solving aging. This idea that moist skin is good for you. So, God, I could go on this forever, but the last thing I'll say, I love debunking the skincare industry, but like moisture is really important for your skin. And unfortunately, when we apply a moisturizer, we're just blocking the pores of skin so that moisture can't escape. It's very hard to moisturize skin. There's very few compounds that you could put on top of your skin that will actually help increase the moisture of your skin. Even drinking water doesn't necessarily increase moisture. Basically, what your skin uses to keep your skin moist is hyaluronic acid. And hyaluronic acid is a natural byproduct of your body. And hyaluronic acid is what's used to retain moisture in your skin. You cannot apply hyaluronic acid and increase hyaluronic acid levels. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to increase hyaluronic acid through your body, whether you're ingesting a hyaluronic acid supplement or you're taking a supplement or a group of supplements that are precursors to hyaluronic acid, such as N-acetylglucosamine, or other supplements that help the cell in your skin, which is the fibroblast that creates the hyaluronic acid, and you take supplements that help improve the health of that, such as vitamin C and vitamin E and niacinamide. And then there's NAD levels. Anyways, all of which is to say, and again, last product plug, if you want to think about skin health, you need an inside out approach. Sure, you can apply a cream, it'll clog your pores, it'll make you look more healthy, but it's not changing the biological makeup of your skin. We've created a protocol that sort of marries what we know about longevity science and the core drivers of aging on the deepest level. And we've looked at how that actually interacts with skin as an organ. We've created a complete skin protocol. It's called cellular skin renewal, and it targets every aspect of skin aging, every hallmark of skin aging through one or a combination of synergistic supplements all in. Anyways, so yeah. Whew.
Ooh, you have my brain wheels are turning. I feel like you've given so much to process, starting with I'm going to go and revamp my skincare products. That's for sure. That's new information. But it sounds like longevity science is really a paradigm shift. It's a different way of looking at health and then making choices that align with that new paradigm.
Completely. It's about knowing that you have agency with your health and getting unstuck from the idea that you just have to age gracefully. That's what aging gracefully really is. It was this idea that you have to accept what is ostensibly something really crappy. We sort of rebranded it and it was more of an acceptance. But yeah, I'd really like us to get unstuck from the concept of aging gracefully.
Simon, this conversation has been so enlightening and interesting, and I feel like I want to take an even deeper dive into everything that you talked about. So thank you so much for sharing your insights. Here at Season of Stuck, as we near the end of the interview, there's just a couple of questions that we like to ask every guest. So if it's okay with you, I have just a few more questions for you.
Let's go for it. Yeah.
Okay. So, question one, thinking about the ideal future version of yourself. So, like the Simon you are working every day to one day grow into. If he could travel back in time and talk to the current version of you, what advice do you think that he would give you on getting unstuck at this point of your life?
It's a really hard one. I don't really have any regrets. I don't know. I don't want to sound like, I don't want to use the word gratitude because it's so overused, but I really do have tremendous gratitude for the moments that I felt stuck, because feeling stuck was a signal. It was an important signal and message that I needed to launch me into getting unstuck. I would never, for example, take away my unhappiness, because unhappiness is a signal of how to improve. If I was complacent, if I was just satisfied, well, then I wouldn't have any drive to do anything. So I don't know. I sort of would just leave things as they are. Yeah.
We think about stuckness similarly. I always say that stuckness is just a step, right? It's just the bridge between what is no longer working for you and then the new version of yourself. And it's so valuable. Doesn't mean that it's pleasant, it doesn't mean that it's fun, but seasons of stuck can be the transformation into the next version of yourself. So I also very much appreciate my stuckness.
It's almost like we think about that phase as, yeah, I love this idea of a step, but the problem with thinking of it as a step is you're separating it from the thing that it folds into, which is the new creation. And actually, what I would almost say is like, unstuck is like the fire of a recipe. Like when you make a recipe, you say, oh, I'll have like a cup of flour, some eggs, some whatever. But the thing that transforms them from raw ingredients that you can have on their own into a cake, let's say, is the heat. So it's that invisible thing that we don't really think of as an ingredient, but is really the essential thing driving that process.
Oh, I love that analogy. I might steal that one from you. Okay, the next few questions are just kind of like a rapid fire. So I'm going to ask you a question and just say the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay.
Favorite movie of all time?
Oof. Okay, so two. Magnolia.
That's a great one.
Yeah, great movie, great soundtrack, like real tour de force. And then Taste of Cherry, which is a Iranian contemporary film, and it is about a man that is trying to kill himself. And and basically the way he wants to kill himself is he wants to take a bunch of sleeping pills and be buried, but he's looking for someone to bury him after he does it. And so the whole film follows him trying to find someone who will bury him. And it just films the conversations between these different people that are like, what are you doing? Like, why? And the whole idea is like, don't you want to aren't you going to miss the taste of cherry? Anyway, so yeah, Taste of Cherry, great film.
Oh, that sounds beautiful. Okay, next question. Go-to coffee order.
Black coffee.
Ooh, I have so much admiration for people who can drink coffee black. I just can't do it. My coffee is basically like a breakfast milkshake. Like it just is like a little bit of coffee, lots of cream.
I just got used to it because of intermittent fasting. It's 0 calorie, it doesn't break your fast. There's lots of great things in coffee. One thing I will say, protesting Starbucks right now, prices have gone out of control.
It's insane.
It's criminal. I'm sorry. Like I went to order a flat white like a couple of days ago and they're like $8.
Also, maybe unpopular opinion. I don't think Starbucks coffee is very good.
It's not.
Go local. Go local.
Exactly.
Go to your small mom and pop coffee shop. It's going to be more affordable. It's going to be like immeasurably better quality coffee, and you're supporting a local business owner. So it's like win-win-win.
100%.
Okay. If you could have any animal in the world as a pet, what would it be?
It would have to be my current pet, Dash. He's a dog. Oh, he heard his name.
Oh, good boy. It is my absolute favorite when people say their current pet, because that's how I feel. I'm like, I would not trade my dogs for like a lion or an elephant or like a cute little panda bear. So I feel the same way.
Yeah, he's brought his blanket and he's heard his name. So he grabbed his blanket and is now trying to come. But while he's trying to walk to me right now, he's stepping on the blanket and it's holding him back. So he's just navigating that right now in the corner.
Oh, Dash, you sweet, sweet boy. I cannot even. Okay, last question. What is the best concert that you have ever been to?
Air. Do you know Air?
No.
Air is like this French synth pop band from like
Ooh.
the noughties that just did like symphonic electronic. I know that's pretty lame, but it was unbelievable.
No, I love synth music. Like 80s new wave, very heavy on the synth was like one of my
Oh,
favorite music eras. So I am on board. Simon, this conversation has been incredible. I feel like I understand longevity science in a much deeper way. And I'm really excited to start applying the things that I've learned. And I know that people listening will feel the same. If people listening want to connect with you and learn more about you and your products, how do they do that?
yeah, God, every way imaginable. There's LinkedIn, Simon Sakhai. I love hearing from people, colleagues, you name it. I just love people. So you can reach out to me personally on LinkedIn, or you can check out our website. That's younglongevity.com. And that's pronounced Carl Jung. Sorry, that's spelled Jung, like Carl Jung. So Jung longevity.com, or on Instagram at Young Longevity. Last tidbit on feeling unstuck. So we named Jung, my company, after Carl Jung, and we named it after him because some of his best work came out of a midlife crisis he had. And he had this famous quote, and the quote was, "Life begins at 40. Up until then, you're just doing research." So this is probably like a good kind of like a little gift to you as you're kind of grappling with that. Like I think the goal is to feel like as you get older, you're just beginning.
Mm, I love that so much. I'm literally going to like paste that on my wall so that I see it every day when I'm working. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Pleasure.
Amazing. Simon, thank you again for being here. This has been fantastic.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.
That's it for today. A huge thank you to our guests for their incredible insights, and a huge thank you to you, our listeners. We know that there are so many podcasts out there to choose from, and we are just so grateful that you chose ours. If you enjoyed today's episode, consider recommending the podcast to a friend or family member that you think would enjoy it. And to make sure that you never miss an episode, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever it is you get your podcasts. And while you're there, if you loved the show, please consider leaving a 5-star review. It plays such a huge part in getting this podcast out to a wider audience and ultimately supporting more people on their journey from stuck to unstuck. And to keep in touch and access even more stuck-related content, follow us on Instagram at Season of Stuck and visit our website, seasonofstuck.com, where you can sign up to get episodes delivered directly to your inbox. Thank you again for being here. It is so, so appreciated. Until next time, I'm Deanna DeBera, and you're listening to Season of Stuck.